Hello, everyone. We are going to um, start a new series as well. We're going to try to go through one medrash on the parsha and pertaining to the parsha every week. Medrashim are a very important part of learning the text of the Torah, because the medrashim, actually, a lot of them are actually explanations to basic questions one might have on the psukim. At the same time, they might be explanations to not simple questions one may have in the psukim, the text. Rather, they might be deeper questions that people may have, which aren't just a simple translation understanding of it. And these questions are actually addressed in medrashim. And these medrashim are, a lot of them are very difficult to understand because they're written in very riddle fashion. So sometimes these midrash may take more time, may take more research in order to try to come up with some understanding of what they might mean. Sometimes I'll try to rely on other commentaries. But this week we're going to focus on a medrash in parshas Behaalotecha, which is this week's parsha. And the medrash is actually addressing the first part of the parsha, which discusses the mitzvah that Hashem gives over to Aharon, which is the mitzvah of actually lighting the menorah. Now, and then afterwards it discusses briefly just how the menorah was made, which is also, the medrash goes into great discussion. Medrash Rabba over here, which we're going to discuss. The medrash Rabba goes into much length about that as well. We aren't going to discuss that part. We are going to discuss, it's a medrash Rabba. It's in the way the medrash Rabba is set up. It goes according to the parshas. Parshas, not what we call parshas, meaning rather there are other meaning wherever there's a pause in context. So here it's in Parshat Tezvav. It's in Ois Ches. I don't know if in all prints it's going to be Ois Ches, but in the print I'm using, it's in Ois Ches. And the medrash has a question which goes as follows. The medrash's question is like this. The medrash asks, it says there's a pasuk in, there's a pasuk in Tehillim. The pasuk in Tehillim, it's in Kapitel Kuf Lametes, chapter 139, pasuk Yud Beis, and it says as follows. It says, Gam choshech layacheshich mimeka. Even darkness will not darken from you. In other words, one understanding that may be is that darkness has no significance to the Eibishter, the way it has significance to us, at least. And to us, darkness represents, right? It darkens things, it covers up on things, it doesn't make them visible. To the Eibishter, it doesn't have that effect, what we call darkness. V'laylo kayem yoir, and the night, which there's darkness at night, kayem yoir, it says, the pasuk continues, it will shine, it will light like day. Kachashecha ka'ira, like darkness is like light to Kadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, there is no significance when you're comparing dark to light, light to dark. These are concepts which are only make a difference to us creatures with those limitations. So the medrash says, based on this pasuk, we can understand an issue that arises in regards to the mitzvah of the menorah, of lighting the menorah, which the issue is, why is it, right? The way the medrash addresses the question is, you're commanding us, why are you commanding us to light these neiros? Because Baruch Hu, this makes no difference to you, right? There's actually a Gemara which discusses, right, that seemingly, right, asks a similar question. Why does the Eibishter need a menorah? And the Gemara says he doesn't need it. It's for the rest of the world. But this medrash is going to have a bit of a different take to answer the question. It's going to actually answer the question as follows. And let me just give one introduction as well. Is this medrash seems to imply as well, just from the context of the question, it's coming with a premise that seemingly there is a need, so to speak, that Hashem needs something over here. But the medrash asks, seemingly the need is not a need that what we would assume is a need, because seemingly light does not make a difference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A light doesn't make a difference. So what is it? What's going on over here? So the medrash gives a very interesting mashal, a parable to that we can relate to sort of understand what is going on over here to some degree. And the medrash says like this, that it's similar, this idea of the menorah is actually similar to a certain story as follows. There was a king. The king had a loved one, someone he loved very much, very dear to him. And the king tells him, you know what, my friend, my loved one, I want to eat by you. I want to eat by you. So make sure you prepare for me. Prepare for me a meal. Make it ready for me. Okay, so his loved one, let's call him Shmerel, his loved one went, he prepared for the meal for the king 3 things which were common back in the times of the Mishnah to have by a meal. One of them is a bed. However, because a bed people would lie on, especially kings, this is what they would do when they would eat. They would lie on like a couch-like, bed-like item for comfort and probably for health reasons as well, for the food to digest. So he prepared a very simple bed, nothing too fancy. A candelabra, either, not sure if he was eating at night or just indoors. They didn't have good lighting, so therefore they needed that, whether it was for more respect, to have better lighting, or just this was the norm. But the candelabra was a simple candelabra as well. And also a table to eat on. So it seems like, he prepared simple things, very simple items, even though this was for a king who loved him. It seems like he couldn't afford more. Okay, so when the king came, right, it was time to come, what happened? The king brought with him his entourage, right? Kings don't go alone, right? They need an entourage with them. And what happened? The entourage brought with them a bunch of golden candelabra. A bunch of golden candelabra for the king, as respect for the king, to use wherever he goes. And they put it in front of the king, surround the king with it. So when the loved one of the king saw this, he saw all this glory and this respect that they had, that they were surrounding the king with. So he got embarrassed, understandably. And he decided to put away everything that he prepared, all the simple items that he prepared for the king, being that they were simple. And he realized this might have been a bad idea, or whatever he was thinking at that point, out of embarrassment. And he just put everything away. So the king, when the king settles down in the house of his loved one, the king tells him, didn't I tell you that I'm going to eat by you? Why didn't you prepare anything for me? Nothing at all. So this friend, Shmerel, who the king loved, responded. He said, I saw all this glory that surrounded you, that came with you as you entered my house, or as you were coming. And I got very embarrassed, so I decided to conceal all the things that I prepared for you, because they were very simple. So the story's not over yet, but I just want to comment in between. This Shmerel seemingly made a pretty dumb move, because you would assume something's better than nothing. But let's continue the story, or the parable. So the king tells him, Chayecha, By your life, this is sometimes used as a term of affection. He says, this is the wording that the medrash uses. Shani poisel es kol kelai sheivesi. He says, I am willing to poisel, to disregard, I'm loosely translating, all of the utensils which I brought. Ubishvil ahavoscha ein mishtamesh el b'shulcha. And for your love, I'm willing and I want to only use what you have to offer me. So in other words, the king was telling him that even though you meant well, right, you assumed in your case that nothing was better than something, because you felt that it would be a almost like a spit in the face to show the king simple items in relative to what the king was used to. So you felt that these simple items meant nothing to the king, and because the king is so far beyond, and luxury is his norm. So you equated nothing to what is relatively nothing in the king's eyes. This is what the person was ultimately thinking, and therefore he believed that it wouldn't make a difference. But what the king was telling him was actually is that that's not what I wanted. I wasn't looking for items. If I was looking for items, you might have a point. That there actually is no point to do anything. He said, but what I was looking for actually was, I wanted to be hosted by you. That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be, to have this connection with you. I wanted to have a meal with you. And the reason I wanted you to prep was not because I wanted these items, right? These items were not what I wanted. I ultimately wanted the connection, which the situation brings about. So let's bring this back to, right, what we're trying to explain in regards to the mitzvah of menorah. That when Hashem is telling the Yidden, I want you to light this menorah for me, right? Just like we brought in the beginning of the medrash, that the pasuk teaches us in Tehillim that actually Hashem does not want, right? Hashem does not want the light. He does not want the, so to speak, the candelabra, the utensil. That's not what he wanted. He didn't, that is insignificant to him actually. What he wanted is that we should bring, based on our own understanding of creating a connection with another creature, making a personal connection. He wants it with our own capabilities and our own methods of connecting. These are tools which we create connection because we speak to physical things. This is our reality. This is what we relate to. So Akash Baruch Hu ultimately wanted that we should use the tools that are at our disposal to be able to create a connection, a personal connection, which means something to us. This is how we perceive connection. This is basically the most we can take it. But these things are all tools for our deeper koiches, our deeper capabilities, which is the connection to the emotions, the heart, and the mind. So ultimately, all these outer things are there for these connections, which are really internally. They're just ways for us to tap into it, because that's how we relate to things. So it seems that the medrash is saying that ultimately this menorah was an expression of that, lighting the menorah, right? It obviously had a specific way of bringing it out, just like any other tool. Begashmis has a way of bringing out different things, right? Just like in the Suda. Each item had a different purpose, right? You had the table, it's there to hold the food. You have the bed, it's there for the person to be comfortable when he's eating. And then you had the candelabra, which is there to create light, to make the Suda comfortable. So that's because in human terms, in human perception, each of these things, right, in actuality, actually accomplish a different effect. And thereby create the scenario to be able to have a Suda. and thereby have other people to have a Suda with and connect. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu ultimately wanted that we should, based on our own capabilities, to make this personal connection with Him, because this is how we make things personal, and He wanted that. So ultimately, this wasn't just something seemingly that was limited to the Menorah. Really, you could apply this to all other things in Beis HaMikdash, actually, all the other avodas that were done. The Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to take all of our capabilities, all of our tools to our disposal, how we react to things and how we connect through our senses. And each different thing has a different form, how it brings that connection and taps into our inner depth, ultimately. And that's what Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted. So it's quite fascinating explanation of the medrash and how to understand ultimately the rest of the avodas in the Beis HaMikdash and the rest of the services. How each one actually brings out another form of our character, taps into another form of our character to ultimately go deep down inside and create another connection to another being, so to speak. In this case, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's quite fascinating, which we could apply this to actually any avodah in the world that we have, any mitzvah. Ultimately, it's the same thing. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us is He wants us to make our avodah, our connection to Him in a most personal way possible. The most personal way possible for us is through using our senses and all these other aspects, which all these mitzvahs are literally using our senses. Even though they're very limited senses, right? They're like in the mashal, they're hedyot, they're simple relative to the Kadosh Baruch Hu's things, but ultimately they're just tools to be able to tap into something much deeper. So this is a very important lesson in regards to a perspective of how an avodas Hashem, also a perspective in regards to connecting with people in general. We have to always look a little deeper into all these tools, right? When we make sudas with people, we have, right? We like to, whether it's mingling, etc., and we try to create bonds with people. We can't forget that all the tools that we're using to do that aren't the main thing. We shouldn't get stuck on them and distracted by them, and therefore let our ego take over in those scenarios. We should remember what the point of them is and not get caught up in them. Hatzlacha Rabba, and everyone have a good Shabbos.